It's just hard when you're starting out. You just feel like you're always having to just like push, push, push. I wish that I had taken that time and been a bit more chill. Things will happen. You don't have to push so hard.
Welcome to Off the Lot, the podcast for filmmakers building careers outside the studio system.
We're your hosts, Ken Kavatoff and Anthony Epp, and this is where we break down what it really takes to get indie films made.
Let's dive in.
Welcome back to Off the Lot, a show about building a film career on your own terms. My name is Anthony Epp, and my guest today has built his own body of work from the ground up, proved it in front of live audiences, and then turned it into award-winning films without waiting for a studio to greenlight. Corey Payette is an Anishinaabe writer, composer, and director, and a member of the Matagami First Nations. He's a founder of Raven Theatre, where he's spent more than a decade building original musicals centered on Indigenous stories. Children of God, Les Filles de Roi, Sedna, and Starwalker have toured across Canada, and he made his Carnegie Hall debut in 2023. During the pandemic, when live theater shut down, he became a feature filmmaker, adopting his own stage musicals to the screen. His film version of Les Filles de Roi played more than 17 international festivals. His latest film, Starwalker, just picked up 10 Leo Award nominations, tied for the most nominated film in the motion picture category this year. What makes Corey's filmmaking journey unique is how he develops a story on stage, brings it to film, gets a touring show, a feature, an album, and published scripts out of one single idea. It's a smart approach to building durable work, and it's exactly the kind of thing our show tries to break down. So, Corey, welcome to Off the Lot.
Thank you so much.
And we'll talk about some of the films that you've worked on, but maybe let's just sort of start a little bit back at how you and I met, which was on the film set of Starwalker, where I was the assistant director and you were the director. Now, this film, as I said before, has just landed 10 Leo nominations. What was it like to hear that your movie had been nominated for so many awards?
Oh, it felt great. Like I feel like I still feel like I'm still kind of making my way and kind of doing things a little bit unconventionally. And so getting that kind of recognition from peers in the industry is actually really special because it makes me feel like, there's some recognition of the work and all of the people involved that, we are able to be among those that are getting recognized. And it's also nice too, after some, many years now of doing these films, I'm getting to know a lot more filmmakers, writers, directors, certain people that I get to actually travel the film festival circuit with, that were like speaking on panels and talking about each other's work. And so then to see them get nominated alongside Starwalker is also kind of like an extra bonus that I hadn't really anticipated, where I'm rooting for them as much as I'm rooting for us. I think that's kind of the lovely part about the community, is that you're kind of like, we all actually get to win in this process. So it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I would say that definitely, Starwalker and the films that are nominated in just for Best Picture are all incredibly rich films. And I mean, I say that from both sides of things. I thought that Starwalker itself as an idea for a film was such a beautiful idea, even when I first got the opportunity to see the play. And when you and I talked about, and I came on board to help out, and I was amazed at this, and I was amazed because I thought to myself, watching the theatrical presentation, you could almost see what the movie could look like when you were watching that. So was that always the idea, was that Starwalker was going to be a play and then you would turn it into a movie, or did that come about organically through other processes?
Well, they went kind of side by side, to be honest, because I developed Starwalker as a TV series with Warner Media for a number of years. And so as I was writing the stage show, I was already imagining how things would be translated to, a TV show. then so Warner Media had the rights to it for, I think it was like 2 years of exclusivity before they could then greenlight it. And the December before we shot, so like I guess 3 months before we went to camera, that's when their rights expired to be able to turn it into a series. And so I just thought, well, we have the stage show happening. Why don't we capitalize on the time and the performers and the costumes and everything that was built and all the like, energy that was swirling around the stage production? And why don't we immediately adapt it into a film? Because the thing is if we had stopped, we would then have to inevitably there would be some recasting, there would be things that would need to change for that production to carry over, because the cast is cast from across the country, so not everyone lives in Vancouver. And so just by having everyone
Right.
here for that time, it just meant that we could basically kill two birds with one stone. And so, yeah, so basically, like 2 days after we closed the stage production, we started principal photography. But I think that that was able to happen primarily because I had had those two projects, kind of the series and the theater show, being developed side by side.
So you were already mentally already figuring out how this movie was going to work in your head.
Yep. Yeah.
Cool. What were the biggest differences between the stage show and the feature? Like, what was easier? What was harder?
Well, I think that for the theater, it feels very familiar to me. It feels like I know and understand that relationship really well. I've been making theater for my entire adult life, and for me, a part of what's so exciting about to get to work in film is that I'm learning. And I am not the expert, and this from working with me. I really look to my collaborators to like challenge me and to make me better and to like figure out like what is the best way to accomplish this vision or like this part of the story. And so it really is like a collaborative effort. And I get to learn so much. I get to really understand the story in a new way. I would say that the biggest challenge of doing the film is just the time that it took to get everyone in drag. That was, and then also the long hours of people being in drag, because typically people are in drag for a couple hours max. And for the shows, when we were doing the stage show, they would get into drag at like 6 o'clock and they'd be out of drag by 10, so it's like that's like 4 hours in a corset. It's like, okay, that's enough, you know what I mean? That's plenty.
Yeah.
But to be in drag and to have just like people touching your face and a corset where you can't breathe and all this for sometimes 10, 12 hours a day, that was something that I wasn't prepared for, and that I was also, that I realized this is why this isn't a common thing to happen, because it just takes so long. It's almost like that was the special effects on our film, was doing the hair and makeup for all these queens. And so yeah, so that was a huge challenge.
Yeah, I remember that was one of, I think, all of our realizations early on in production where we would have, I mean, you talk about keeping everybody in drag for 10 hours. We realized it just physically wasn't possible most of the time because it's uncomfortable. Everything, it's not easy to sit around that way, especially if you're waiting for an hour or two before your next scene. But then the
Hmm.
process of getting in and out of that is another 20 to 30 minutes sometimes, because it isn't just an instant, let's go. You have to plan for all of that. You have to plan for that time that in between that's going to take to get everybody out and back into something else. I remember a few times where we were talking about, oh, well, then we have to do a costume change. And then we all would just kind of roll our eyes and go, oh my gosh, that's going to be another hour before we can actually get everybody back here.
Yeah, it was like a huge challenge. And then I remember too the days when we didn't have any drag were sort of like, this is easy. Like we're like, this is what
Yeah.
it's what it's normally like. But added that extra drag level, and then also when the whole cast was in drag, like there are times where there's 8 drag queens like fully done up on stage, and
Yeah.
that just takes so long. It's so long, and also the detail at which the makeup artists would have to like monitor every single person and like make sure that they looked, that's the thing. When I saw that makeup was nominated, I was just like, yes, like I feel like they really were stars of that film, and so it's a nice thing to see them get recognized because they worked really hard.
Yeah, that was one thing where, it was like it was makeup's show. Costumes comes in kind of second on that too,
Yeah,
because the costumes were like not just in the design of the costumes, but just in the in the continuity too of all of that too. Because one of the things I learned from working on that show with you was just the thought that a live action show every night, the costumes can be a little bit off, like, or if something's not working right, you can go with it because it's just the way it is that day. And the makeup can be a little bit different on one show versus another because it doesn't have to match what you did the day before. It just has to look close enough to it. Whereas in ours, in the feature film version, it's like you could be shooting the same routine 2 or 3 days in a row, and the makeup, if you want to make sure that the show works, the makeup has to match every single day perfectly, like, or near perfectly.
yeah.
And that's almost like putting cuts and bruises on people, where it's like has to look exactly the same in everything, or else it's fake.
And then sometimes, like, because we shot the principal photography in 2023, and then we went back and shot additional photography in 2024. And the fact that we were sometimes cutting between the person a year apart in drag, or it was, the challenges were enormous, and I think that, I don't think that people would know that that's the way that we did it. Well, we, when you were giving the intro, just about how unconventional it is to get to do like these big feature musical films, it's also in producing and thinking about timelines and when you can do things. So, like, for example, really trying to capitalize on the group numbers and all of the like group drag numbers in our principal photography, and then also having in the back of our mind, okay, well, we're gonna do reshoots. So when we come, we can raise some more money for reshoots in like a year, and then come back and pick up anything that we've missed. And so thinking about that as not just being like, get it all right now. It's like, if you don't have money, it's actually something that I learned in Les Filles du Roi, where we actually, had left the principal photography where we had a little bit of money left. And I remember thinking like, we should have just spent all of it, because when we had time to raise more, we had time to like, to go back and to pick things up later. But with Star Walker, we actually built that in from the beginning and totally planned to like spend it all on principal and then raise more money so that we could like finish the film, basically.
And you had to prioritize a little bit on which cast members you sort of knew you might have to come back and do those reshoots with, and base that around, well, this person won't be available a year from now, or will be
Yeah.
to fly this person across the world or wherever they might be is going to cost a lot of time and money. We might not get that person back, or those, because I think there were a couple of people who don't live in Canada even, right? Like they
Yeah.
live abroad. And making sure you think to yourself, okay, well, those folks we're not going to get back, so we have to make sure we get them done. But because there's a few scenes in that film where I, even just watching it, I'm like, oh, I remember shooting that, but the people that are supposed to be in that same scene weren't on set that day because that was shot a year later.
Yeah. All the tricks, all of the little tricks.
Oh, the tricks. Oh, the tricks. But it's amazing because that there is a little bit of that. It's a bit of a different mindset from how a lot of filmmakers approach things, because we do think about it like we've got to capture everything all at once, and if we don't, they sacrifice getting a scene fast but not properly in order to make sure we capture everything, because you never know you're going to have that extra money. You don't think that you might be able to get some extra money later to actually do those reshoots the
Hmm.
way that you're intending.
Yeah. And
So
the other thing too is also, I think part of what I've found really benefits as well is that a lot of the people that I'm working with are people that I've worked with for a long time, like many years. So they're not people that are like new relationships. And so in fact, when I'm on set, a lot, like, I don't actually spend that much time with actors usually we've already had those conversations. I've already directed them basically in the prep. And then when we get to set, it's like I'm just adjusting slightly and they're already just doing what it was. It's very rare for a performer to be on set and for them not to, know where we are or like what the whole story is, everything. So that's really, I think, been great about getting the chance to work with a lot of the same people is that there's that like familiarity, and it just also saves time. Then you're right in it, and everyone just knows where they are. And I think that would be different
Yeah.
if it were someone coming in fully fresh, where they just got the sides the day before or something, and then they're on set having to like do this, huge scene.
Yeah, and that's interesting that because especially with Star Walker rolling straight into prep on the feature right after the live show was over, you did have most of your same actors playing those roles, and we always talk about directors having time to rehearse with their actors. You've done that for like a month already before they even need to. So the performance side of things, the actors know the story, they know what they're supposed to be doing, they know their role in the story, and yeah, like you said, you're just kind of coming in, and now we're just blocking for camera. We're really just taking everything they've done for a month already and blocking it for camera in this particular case.
And some of them, for that show in particular, um, we started in November. So we went to camera in March, but the actors, I had started rehearsals with the leads, with the three leads in November. So even just thinking about that amount of time to live with a character is really unique. And so it was kind of like they all just knew what they were doing all the time, which was
Yeah.
fantastic.
So you came to feature film directing after you've been doing live theater and music for so many years. How did that all get started? Like, what drew you into this sort of artistic field of performance art? What's your origin story?
Well, I've always been like it's always been through music. So I started through music as a songwriter, and then I was in musicals as an actor primarily, and I worked as an actor for 10 years in my like professionally from like 19 to like or like 20 something, like 27 or 28, in different shows across the country. But it was at the time, it was like I was very much a background person. I wasn't like a leading person. And primarily it was because those stories that I could have done weren't available to me. And so that's things that are, queer stories, Indigenous stories, stories that are about, people like me and my community. And so when I was coming up, I really felt the gap there, and that I didn't fit within the stories that were being told, and that I wanted to change that, and I wanted to be a part of a group of writers and creators who started to tell new stories and started to make that. This is even before like the whole diversity conversation came in. It's like I started writing my first musical in 2011, and basically that was where it all started for me, was through trying to create those new stories and those new opportunities. And musical theater was what was is what I'm passionate about. I love musicals. I find music is an extraordinary tool to express emotions that are beyond words. I think that music helps us to feel things for characters in a different way. Music also is a wonderful tool to express this, sometimes the feeling of a moment versus what a character is saying in the moment. So a character can be saying like, "Oh, I love this," or "I love you," or whatever, but underpinning that with music can help to make what they're saying feel different. And so that's interesting to me. And oh, yay, kitten.
Yeah.
And so yeah, and then in terms of I'm on my fifth musical. Like I just premiered my fifth original musical this last spring, and really when the pandemic happened, And I had, about, I would say, 6 or 7 years of tours lined up when that happened, that all just got canceled when the pandemic happened. So basically, I had years of work scheduled, and then it all went away overnight, which that did for so many people. And I thought this is a great time. I'd always wanted to get into film. I'd always wanted to explore and learn, but it's tricky when you've been doing things in a certain way and you've achieved success in your field. It's hard to then go back and be a student again and to be someone who's like kind of green in the field. And so I needed to surround myself with people who like knew, who could support me. And I feel like I found that in Ian and Parham, who are my co-cinematographers that I've worked with, and a whole group of people who've like rallied around me to, both support the vision that I have and also kind of do a lot of that, mentoring of like saying, okay, well, I see what you're trying to get at here. This is a way that we can accomplish that, and sort of help me to translate some of that into film. And the thing that was great about Starwalker is that also everyone got to see the stage production first. So everyone really saw what the story was meant to be, so that when we got to set, there was an awareness. Like, how many opportunities do people have to like see the thing that they're going to be capturing before they actually go to camera? So it was a real it was a great way of bringing us all together and getting us all on the same page.
Yeah, that was really an interesting. It's almost like having a dream of what the vision of the film is going to be, and watching it in real time, and then going through the script afterwards and going, oh, okay, yeah, I see where these beats fit into play, and then also seeing where the cinematic part of the story lives, because there are some things you have to add in a movie version in order to create logical transitions and sort of scene connections that you might not have in the live version, but also some things you have to take away sometimes, because the live version offers opportunities to do certain things that you can't necessarily achieve in the film part of the movie. And so it's very interesting, because you ultimately know that your entire team is making the same film right from the get-go, because we all want to know what it's supposed to feel like at the end, which is, I find, a very difficult thing to get everybody on board with in quote unquote normal world, because we all read the script a certain way and with our own biases in mind, if you will, and have our own idea of what the movie should look like or what the movie's going to become. But this way, you're seeing what the movie should feel like already live, and then you're just executing on trying to get to that point or exceed it with the film.
Yeah, especially the on stage numbers, all of those stayed the same. So any number
Yeah.
that was like performed for an audience, that all stayed the same. It was really whenever we went out of the theater. So like, for example, going to Trout Lake and like a park where it's like, then people were like, how are you going to do this? How is this going to translate? And that was really fun for me, as well as going into like all the little neighborhoods in East Van, and really not having East Van be playing Seattle or playing LA or something like that, but actually celebrating East Van for its quirkiness, and for what, like seeing it in this like really beautiful light, and it being itself, was something that I just felt like constant moments of realizing, you know, and it being on the festival circuit, sharing the film, a lot of people have talked about it, really kind of reminding them of spaces within their own communities and their own cities that are like East Van, like, that like Edmonton has its own version of East Van, and Toronto has its own version of East Van, and thinking about all of these different cities and how there's an East Van in many cities, and that those like safe spaces and spaces where you can have, this kind of queer radical art being shared, they need to be protected, and that this film really helps to kind of like make the case for that.
Yeah, it made East Fan a character in the movie,
Yeah, for sure.
in a lot of ways. Yeah, especially, and that's one of the things the cinematic version of this does that the live theater becomes more of an impression of, is that the cinematic version of the film allows you to expand that world a bit. And I remember just watching Dylan do some of his routines out on the streets, which I found to be so beautiful. Like some of the more beautiful moments in the film are him doing some of his songs while he's wandering
Hmm.
the streets of East Van. And you're just seeing East Van in all of this sort of interesting texture and light and all this other stuff, night, day, all of it. And having a person sort of in their own world singing to themselves, which was also amazing because it felt like he was isolated in it, even though East Van is so vibrant and has so many people around. But he felt like he was exploring the world at the same time.
Yeah, that was really special.
Kind of getting into the nitty gritty of like the logistics of this. So it's an interesting idea putting these kind of projects together. You're building it within the community. So, for example, Starwalker is a live play that performed at the Cults Theater and then translated to a film. How did you guys put together the financing, the all of that to get to be able to make a film like this? You mentioned you had some money left over at the end, but did you do that through arts grants or through donations or anything like that? How did the two projects kind of come together?
Yeah, a mixture of all of those actually. We didn't have any traditional like telefilm or ISO money involved in this. Really, we were looking at arts grants, we were looking at donors coming in, but also because we had had many years of tours that had been canceled, all of that is like artists wages, you know what I mean, like basically like production income that had been lost. So we were actually able to take advantage of the government programs to help to recover some of that, and that was also very helpful in us being able to basically put artists to work, put people to work, and to have it be, you know, like I think the typical way of financing a film is, you know, it's like that, you know, repayable advance, like through something like Telefilm. But with us, we really didn't think of it as being that model. It really was about, and it is still about, just sharing this story from this, like, you know, different perspectives. It was never meant to be this, like, you know, giant money making venture, and it's still not. It's really because of the story that everyone wanted to share it. And I think that that's kind of a little bit different when you're operating outside of that, you know, commercial filmmaking model.
Yeah, and I mean, you really do need the passion of the community to come together. Obviously, you know, we're still paying all the artists and all the crew to do their work, but these are kind of projects that, you know, deserve being told, but because, you know, the commercial viability, and I mean, it has to be a good project at the end. It has to be a project that people want to witness and see. But it is hard to find that funding early for something like that because you don't know where it's going to find its home. Has it found a home yet? I know that the festival circuit has been crazy for Starwalker, but has it found sort of its home in streaming or in any of those sources?
Not yet, not yet, but we're still, you know, we're still in the festival circuit for the next few months. And so we're kind of wrapping that up and hoping to have some sort of broadcast or streaming attached to it, hopefully by this fall. But the other thing is also that I think, you know, when you're telling this kind of story, and I think with Les Filles du Roi, my first feature, what I learned in that process, because we just thought we were you know, filming that, and we were just going to share it with the people who we were supposed to tour to. You know, it was the initial vision for it was so small scale, and then it kind of just like ended up being so successful and went to all these film festivals and won a ton of awards, and you know, we were very grateful for all of that. But with Starwalker, when we went into it, you know, it was so early on. Les Filles hadn't even been released yet. So we shot all of that before Les Filles even started. So it is this like snowballing thing where, like, a little bit of the ways through Starwalker, we realized like this might be a big film for people, or it might be seen by a lot of people. And so it was really special to get to actually like intentionally think more about how do we integrate the community? How do we make sure that we're shedding light on different perspectives? Having people from the ballroom scene, having trans people, having drag queens in the film who are doing drag, who like do it professionally, and it gave us such a larger sort of recognition of the community that already exists here in East Van, the queer community, drag community, and ballroom scenes. And that has only made the work better. It's only made it where it feels like we're creating this thing alongside the community instead of it kind of having this, like, I don't know. It definitely doesn't have an extractive feel. It doesn't feel like we're just like helicoptering in and doing this and leaving. It's like we have a commitment to these people and this place, this community, and I think that really comes through in the film.
Yeah, you definitely feel that. And you feel because I remember just even working on the film, how interconnected everybody felt, because I think they had all worked on the live show as well, or many of them had worked on the live show. But there was definitely this vibe that that this was almost like a theater troupe in a way, a group of people coming together to tell a story and then do it in a filmmaking medium, if you will, or filmmaking
Mm-hmm.
format. So there's differences there, but it's definitely not something that felt transactional necessarily. Like, didn't feel like a thing where everybody's like, okay, well, this is another movie we're working on and so on. It felt very
Yeah.
much like this is a special opportunity. And again, just the idea that the story itself, I think, had to be emotionally compelling enough for that to work. I think that there's a lot of beautiful elements on their own, but in the end, you're telling a very relatable story. um, However you come to watch the film, it's a very relatable story. Maybe talk a little bit about that. Like, what is Star Walker about? I think we've talked about it a lot, but we actually haven't actually said what the movie is. What exactly
Mm-hmm.
is the film for people who aren't familiar with it?
Yeah, well, it's the story of a two-spirit indigenous queer person named Star, who is introduced to the House of Borealis, a fictional house, drag house in East Vancouver. And basically, when they go to the House of Borealis, their whole world changes. They are able to find love, home, and a real like sense of self and identity that you get to see them transform over the course of the film into this like powerful person and who knows themselves and who can celebrate themselves from really being very sort of quiet and not really having that like um outward ability to connect or to really see themselves as beautiful. And so yeah, and it takes them on that whole journey of self acceptance and self empowerment. But like through the catalyst of that is the beauty of drag performance.
Yeah, it's such an interesting mix of like meta, where it's like it's a musical within a musical, because there's the live action outside of the House of Borealis that is also done through music and musical and singing and so on, and dance bits, combined with an actual live stage show that sort of drives the film, which is an interesting way to kind of come into the story, because you're kind of always in a musical even when you're not in the musical. Like, you're always an audience member watching a musical, or you are actually part of it, I think. And I found that the songs are incredibly catchy. And I know that we always listen to what the soundtracks that are available in the car, which I think is also an interesting thing. Is that I think for musicals to work, the music itself also has to have a feeling of it has to have that evergreen sustainability to it, where people are humming the tune on the way out the door, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And I've noticed that was one thing that about this particular show that I really resonated with, was that the music was so fun to listen to and fun to be a part of. um and actually, makes you kind of want to be in the stage show with everybody when you're watching it.
And that's what I love so much about getting to create musicals is really that I'm able to, because Star Walker doesn't really sound like any other musical that I've written. It really sounds like Star Walker. It sounds like me because I have a very specific way of writing, but it's not like Les Filles du Roi. And it's not like my most recent musical on native land that I just premiered this past spring. They all have their own musical identity, and they sound, very different, and that's fun for me. Like, I actually get to have, like, I get to stretch myself. I get to really push what I can do and write, like, dance music, or sort of like some of the songs are a bit like 80s pop, you know what I mean? They have this like sort of retro vibe, and that's so much fun as a composer and a writer and a producer, to like to really think about the like world of this place. What does the House of Borealis sound like? And I feel like that, hearing that people are going away, humming the songs, are listening to them back. For me, that's where I just feel like the work is doing what it's meant to do, because it doesn't mean that we can only see it when we're watching it in theaters. It means that, someone can be listening to that at the gym or while they're walking to the store. Like, there's a part of music living in everyday life that is just such a privilege and a beautiful thing that I get to be a part of. So yeah, and then same with, like, for things like the song "God in Drag," "You're Beautiful," and hearing from trans people, two-spirit people, queer people, gender diverse people, where they feel that that song articulates this thing inside that is very much, that it articulates that feeling of what it feels like to embrace your full self, or to see yourself as beautiful for, a lot of people from within our community. And I just think, like, what a beautiful thing that song gets to have that kind of relationship with people in terms of their own sense of self and their own self discovery. I just, it's a really beautiful thing.
There's one word that I use to describe it's joyful, right? Like, well, Star Walker by itself, like, it's just a very joyful musical. And I think you've once described like joy as sort of an act of resistance in
Hmm.
itself. That for me feels like a very personal thing, like where you use joy as a way of expressing resistance and bringing light to the community. Maybe go through that a little bit of that perspective.
Well, it comes, so when I started writing Star Walker in 2019, drag queen story hours weren't being protested. And it seemed like our path to equality for the queer community was more within reach. Like, we were getting more rights and we were getting more protections. But then since that time, things have gone backwards, and we've seen targeting of trans people and queer people, and communities are not as safe as they once were. And so, even though that wasn't what I was writing the show to respond to, I do think that having Star Walker act as a reminder of our joy and a reminder of our beauty within this community is something that I think that the people who are trying to craft those destructive narratives, we need to counter that with our truth. And that is that we are a joyful people. We are people who are strong and powerful, resilient, beautiful, no matter what those, policymakers are going to try to, spin those lies to tell people, a story of who we are that isn't true. And so, I think that part of the reason why the community and people are so surprised, and so, when they come out of it, it's sort of like an overwhelming feeling of joy, is just because it is so dark right now in a lot of places, especially in the States, where the film has been screened a lot, and the response is like an overwhelming sense of people being like quite overcome by being reminded of that joy, that like we still have that. And within the House of Borealis and the story of Star Walker, there's not really the outside oppressive force, right? It's like they're all living their beauty, they're supporting each other, and there's like this, like, yes, they're just having to struggle their own inner demons to show up for each other, but the oppression of the outside world isn't what they're overcoming. And I think that that's a great perspective to share, that it's not only about that outside oppression, but it's also in what we carry within ourselves, and that, like, trauma that of past experiences that we then also have to overcome. But the thing that is exciting too is also that I think that a lot of people are being introduced to different kinds of drag and different ways of expressing, it's not just RuPaul's Drag Race style drag. It's also sort of absurd drag, and August's thing is a drag thing. Not a drag king or a drag queen, but just a drag thing. And I think that is very much embedded within the like heart of the film, and is something that I hope offers a great balance to what is being said out there, that uh, does feel sometimes very loud.
Yeah. And so much of the work is about like reclamation, about, taking back joy for yourself, as opposed to letting the outside world take it from you, or letting the outside world try to impose its own views on what the community is feeling and what the community really needs, which is, language, culture, identity, and all those other things, which is such a key component of resistance, and a key component of of community and keeping together, and about reclaiming that sense of self, and reclaiming that sense of
Mm,
ownership of who you are, who we are as community. And it does feel very personal, even though you see it very much. You're expressing it in a very, I would say, entertaining way. Like there's no better way to really put it. Is that it's a very engaging and entertaining uh, access point. It's hard not to watch the movie and not feel something.
hmm
And it's very hard to feel any kind of backlash watching the film. Like it feels just a very inclusive film.
hmm
If I can say that, that's been my feeling about it. Just having watched it a couple of times in different settings, and feeling the way the audience feels about watching it as well.
hmm Yeah, and I
Yeah,
think that's what's kind of like, you think about what do you want to be putting out into the world, and for me, Starwalker really encapsulates something that uh, I felt was missing in terms of that piece of joy. So many queer stories, which classic, amazing, but they're very much trauma focused, and I think that for Starwalker it's really about like self acceptance, about chosen family, and about celebrating our beauty and our joy. And I'm proud to have added that to the larger canon of queer stories. There isn't one story or one perspective, but rather many, many different experiences from within our community. And I think Starwalker does a good job of kind of offering a counter to that narrative that's been told.
is there any point, with all this work that you're putting out there, that you've sort of felt defeated in your career?
Yeah, well, I definitely thought that Star Walker had I will say that when all of that went down with the TV show, there was a part of me that thought that it may never happen, and that we would never, that it could have just died there, and not happened. And in fact, I've since, it was a cohort of us. There were a number of people who all had shows in development with Warner Media at the time, and the Star Walker is the only one out of the shows that were all in development that has seen the light of day. And I think that's so easy sometimes for things just to, like, so much work, so much energy to just like never be made. How many shows
Yeah.
have had that kind of development and then just never see the light of day because they weren't picked up? Like, beautiful stories, just extraordinary work. um, and so I felt like that was the point where I thought, this may not happen. But I think that it also teaches you that you have to kind of adjust your expectations and remember that the story is actually the most valuable thing, and that connecting with people and sharing that story in whatever way you can, that will always lead to what it was meant to be. It wasn't meant to be a TV show, or at that point. but the film was still in there, and the story was still worthy of being shared and being told. So I think that even though it was a low point, I'm really proud of all of us, the whole team, for kind of rallying around and making this happen, in a different way, and kind of like being scrappy and like making it happen, even though there wasn't that like giant studio behind us to like help us to realize it in the way that maybe we had seen it initially.
Yeah, it's sort of that idea of like it forced you to pivot towards something that uh that in a way may give it ever a little bit more life. Like you could have been stuck there for like you said, could never happen, but it could
Yeah.
also, even if it had happened, it wouldn't have turned out in the same way as this one did. So this has created its own life. Is there any follow up to this Star Walker story, or is it sort of a story that you feel has told itself already?
Well, it's interesting because in the TV show, so each episode was a different character of the House of Borealis. So Starwalker was one of the characters in the House of Borealis, but then each of the different characters then had a backstory and sort of had a similar treatment that we get for Star. So there's all that work and all that development in those characters' stories. So there certainly are many other stories that can be told. I think for now I'm on to other projects and other things, and unless something comes along that where this is becomes something that I can focus on again, maybe someday. But for now, it's the goal was sharing the film.
And for you now personally, the work that you're doing, I think you've said they're all starting to support each other. So like your previous work is kind of starting to be supported by your current work, and it's creating a bit of a snowball.
Yeah.
Where do you see your trajectory going as a filmmaker and an artist in the next 3 to 5 years, for example?
Well, I'm still in development for this. My first musical that I ever wrote is still in development, and it's the next feature film that I'm looking to shoot. It's quite a bit bigger than the other ones, because it takes place in two time periods, and it's a giant cast, and it's huge. So historical pieces like are a challenge in different ways. But so that's the next one that I'm shooting next summer, not this summer but the next summer, or sometime in that year. And then from there, I don't really know. I have like a TV show that I'm working on, that I'm working to develop, and lots of ideas. Like I think the thing is you never really know what's going to come to the front of what you're working on. And so it's sort of like you just keep all these things moving, so that as soon as that opportunity comes, it's like, yeah, great, I have this project ready to go, or I have something that I'm especially when it comes to some of my theater work that I'm adapting into films or TV. It's like so much of that pre-work of developing the world of these characters and the dramatic arcs is already done. Like a lot of that work has been happening over, I've been working on a lot of these since, the like before 2020. So it's nice to be able to go back to them and revisit these characters and reimagine how that might look on film. And so it's really great, and also just feeling like I have more confidence now, and looking to also work with new people. And so I would say in like 3 to 5 years, I would hope that I would be able to like direct uh someone else's work at some point, not where it's like just my own writing, my own work that I'm realizing from the ground up, but also to be able to work with other writers on other projects. That would be really great, because the sets that I've worked on have been ones where I'm wearing all those hats, and so it'd be interesting to be able to share that, and to be able to bounce off of collaborators, to be able to share the stories with a shared vision.
Yeah. Have you sort of got that feeling of, because you've obviously worked in live theater for so many years and worked in music. Do you really feel like, as a film director, a movie director, is that sort of the path you want to keep pursuing and growing in? What do you love most about being a movie director, I guess, over the work that you do in other fields?
Well, one thing that I love is that I feel that a huge part of my work is cinematic and is about capturing the feel of a place and the sort of like we were talking about East Van and it having an identity in the film. I feel that that's something that I often write about on stage or write about in my theater work, but that you really cannot fully capture unless you're filming it, or I guess if you were doing some sort of projection in the theater, maybe you could do that. But in terms of like immersing yourself in the place, film is extraordinary for that. And so that's something where, um, trying to pursue that vision and keep pushing myself to find new ways to capture some of those places, and then also get to work with new performers and people that are, I feel like with all of my films so far, it's been very much people that I've known and people that I have a long relationship with, and I think that's been great in so many ways. But I'm also excited to work with new people and to find a common language with people that I'm meeting for the first time and having to like make this thing together. I feel like there's so much to learn and there's so much that can challenge me, and I'm not looking to just do something because I've done it before, and because that feels
Right.
comfortable. I think that film offers me a chance to play and a chance to learn that I really haven't found in other parts of my artistic life, and so that's really really exciting.
In that idea of sort of making space also to work with new people, like if you could go back in time and give yourself some quick tips on how to navigate your career, what would you tell your 5 years ago self, if as you're getting into making movies?
What a great question. I think that in the process of learning how things run, I think that a lot of times frustrations that I had were out of not understanding the full process, if that makes sense. And that
Hmm.
if I could go back and tell myself something, it would be to really be more of an observer and try to ask questions about process instead of trying to like push process, if that makes sense. I think that I go into that like, I'm driving the train and I'm like pushing things along, and I'm very much of a strong willed person any in all the rooms that I'm going in. I'm definitely like coming in hot. And I just think that in terms of some of these sets, I do think that I've learned now a lot more, and I wish that I had uh taken that time and been a bit more chill, I guess. And I would have said that to
Well, yeah,
myself, like, you can, things will happen. You don't have to push so hard. But that's hard, right? Like, it's just hard when you're starting out. You just feel like you're always having to just like push, push, push because you feel that you're losing the light or you're losing that performer or you're losing this energy. And so you just feel like you have to. And I think that the thing that I know now is that you don't always have to. And it's okay.
well, part of that drive and pushing forward is also necessary, because this, I think, is well, filmmaking in general is hard enough. Getting a movie made is hard enough, but when you start to layer in a lot of the material and subject matter, I mean, making a musical is very hard in movie making. I mean, it's not
Mhm.
easy to make a good musical. It's also not easy to make a musical about the subject matter that you're addressing in
Yeah.
an honest way, but also just to get the funding doesn't the traditional funding streams aren't always that receptive to getting involved with that kind of stuff. So you're
Yeah.
battling just like every filmmaker, you're battling money, but you're also battling money, logistics, and all these other things. I remember we had on Star Walker, like we had a 14-day film shoot, and then for the 4 days of reshoots. 14 days is a ridiculously small amount of time to make a movie, um, but it is the constraint that you're given, and it does require a little bit of pushing, but then also recognizing that idea that you know physics is physics and time is time, and if you only have x amount of people doing x amount of work, you can't make 3 people do the work of 10 people.
Totally.
It's much more difficult to do that, and the sacrifice there is that it's going to slow things down for you as a director or as a filmmaker on set, and that's not always um it is a balance. You rarely work with people who don't want things to just move at their own pace, the pace that they're comfortable with, and that's always the battle. Why does it take 12 hours to film 5 minutes of footage? It doesn't. It's not because we sit around all day doing nothing.
No. And if anything, there's also a learning that happens around if you do the prep, that you actually save the time.
Mm-hmm.
If you have it all prepared and have had those conversations, you'll save the time later on. But all of these things, like, you just kind of have to dive in and learn and be put in those situations, and thankfully work with
Yeah.
people who are, better than you, and who can help you and help to realize your vision, as wild and sort of out there as it is. And that's where I'll say, like, even in terms of, like, do you remember that shot? So there's this like the oneer, all the oneers, where, like, in the winter solstice ball, where we're, like, on stage with the performers, and then it follows the performer into the wing, and then they're backstage in a scene, and then they come back on stage, like, without a cut, you know what I mean? And all those things, it was so interesting because I
Mm-hmm.
feel like it was like a dance. It was like a full on, like, the camera and everyone was dancing with the performers, where
Yeah.
everything was so heavily timed. And then I think, why am I doing this to myself? Like, why am I making it so hard on everyone? But it also is, like, when you see it in the edit, it's quite, you go like, wow, that must have been really hard to shoot. And it was.
Yes. But also the reason there's that whole thing of, like, everything has a reason to it that is a storytelling reason, not necessarily a technical reason. It's not about we did it because we wanted to see if it would work. It's more,
Yeah.
it actually makes you feel like you're on, the emotional element is feeling like you're in the backstage with the
Yeah.
performers while they're going in between sets, which is something you don't get necessarily in the live performance because you won't feel it that way necessarily. Whereas here you feel like you're moving into, like, front stage, backstage, all these things
Yeah.
at the same time. And so the you're right, like why do that? There are much easier ways to cover all of that, but those ways of covering all of that would probably not have given it the same emotional resonance as the way that we found. And I
Yeah.
remember that because it's not just the camera, but it's everybody, because the moment the camera turns to see something else, that has to be ready to go as well. That person has to
Yeah.
be in position, and maybe there was a crew member there who needed to be there before, who has to move now and has to get out of the way. And it's a lovely dance between crew and cast and camera and everybody, who just to try to make it all work. And when it works, it's great, and when it doesn't work, sometimes it's great too, because it creates other moments and memories.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It was so, that was, I would say, one of the most challenging things to direct. But I also think that because of the team, everyone, like, got it, and we were all kind of chasing after that same thing. And that was also the day that the fire department showed up because they thought the building was on fire because we were using so much smoke.
Yes. And we had to close things down for about 20 minutes while they came in and took a look, and we aired everything out because because the
Yeah.
atmosphere had taken over the entire set. I
That's what I
remember
always
that.
say. There's
Yeah.
always one day where everything goes off the rails, and
Yeah.
that was our day.
Yeah.
Seeing
Yeah.
the all the drag queens on stage, and then the lineup of firemen looking at them. I was like, why? We should have got a picture of that. That would have been amazing. But it's like, it really was like Wow. They basically what happened was is that we were using so much haze and smoke that it was like too much. It had gone on for too long, and so we were like, okay, great, let's like open up all the doors to air it out because just to like because there was too much smoke. And then when we opened up the doors, all the smoke went up, and people in the neighborhood thought the building was on fire. So they called the fire department, and the fire department comes in, opens the doors, turns on the lights. There are all our drag queens on stage, full drag, and there's these firemen standing there. It that
Yeah.
was a moment.
Just having this like this moment of like, okay, well, that wasn't what we expected when we walked in the room.
No, not at all. But yeah, those are the memories right there.
Yeah. And it's a beautiful moment on screen that doesn't tell all the backstory to all of that, but it's a beautiful moment on screen where you just where it works uh, in spite of all of that. And I always think to myself, like, 14 days, 18 days with the reshoots and so on, and you think to yourself, out of whatever constraints were created, a movie was made.
Yeah.
And it turned out very successfully. Obviously, we've got the accolades and what you mentioned earlier, which was really interesting, was this idea that you've got these accolades, like the Leo Awards are a good example of these 10 nominations, and it's 10 nominations in very different categories, like obviously actors, makeup, costumes, all these other things, and of course director and production. But it really shows the level of work from different people that went into making this movie so good,
Mm. Yeah,
and
it really
recognizing
was
the talents of all those people.
that collaborative effort, and recognizing what a huge lift it was, and just so proud, and for it to be. I think you said in the intro that it's tied for the top film nominations. Like there's, us, and I think it's Akashi. Like I loved Akashi. I love that film, and to have us be like in that we were nominated for the same amount of awards as them is absolutely mind blowing and such an honor. And yeah, I just feel like what a huge celebration for everyone involved in Star Walker. Such a yeah, it's like huge thing to shoot a musical feature film, a drag feature musical. Like it's nuts, but we did it.
Yeah, it's the most unlikely of film ideas, but it now seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
But it's a wonderful film, and can't wait for it to be. If you have a chance to watch it, I think it's still on doing the festival circuit. Where's it going to be going over the next month or two? Do you have a calendar?
Yes, it's right now. Well, it was just at the New York Independent Film Festival. It's at Rainbow Film Festival in Edmonton. And then it's at the Sudbury Queer North Film Festival. It's in the Capitol Theater in Nelson for their film festival. So just go to starwalkerfilm.com and see all of the screening information there. And yeah, and then hopefully cheering us on at the Leos.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Corey, for all your time and for chatting about the film. I remember being involved in like 3 years ago, and it's so wonderful to see it getting the recognition it deserves.
Oh, thanks, Anthony. This is great.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so that's it for this week's episode of Off the Lot. We want to hear from you. If there are any topics you want covered or any questions you'd like answered, please email us at podcast.offthelot@gmail.com.
You can also find us on Instagram and YouTube. Our handles are in the show notes. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe. And share this with your friends. See you next week.